Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. After a busy week of sports, we're starting to see the light as we're officially a week away from spring. And the doldrums of the past 5 weeks of the Sports Dead Zone Part 1 are almost behind us. We have some interesting topics to get into over the course of the next hour, so stay tuned because I'll uncover it all as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me, going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And to think, people, now as we're approaching the middle of March, as we get closer to the madness, which will really begin a week from today, as we get closer to a baseball season, which I understand starts on Tuesday in Japan with the Cubs and Dodgers. But in essence, 2 weeks from today, we'll have a new baseball season that we'll raise the curtain on. But think about it. 1 month from today will be the conclusion of the NBA season. And now as we get into the final month and we take a look at the land throughout the NBA, and I know last night you had a big game there, an NBA Finals preview, if you will, between the Celtics and the Thunder. I'll start there, but I have a big picture question that's even more fascinating when we look at this final month and the pressure that's going to come from two cities in particular, two cities, two teams that lead each of their conferences. But for starters, last night, the Thunder showed why they are going to be a tough out. And it's no surprise. I mean, people who've watched the NBA all year know that the Thunder have been formidable, that they've been spectacular, led by their, I would think, MVP of the league, despite the fact Nikola Jokic has put up just monster numbers this year, a triple-double at center. I mean, think about that. But for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a.k.a. SGA, putting up 34 points on the road in a complete team effort. And when we take a look at the Thunder here, we know that the West is going to be a bit more of a gauntlet there with teams that have been there before, whether it's the Lakers or the Nuggets or teams that are on the come up, whether it be Memphis or Houston. And even Golden State got to throw them in as well because they are on a torrid streak. But with the East, right now, it's looking like a 2.5 team race, despite the fact that the Bucks have played better. And the Knicks, who got a miraculous 3 there at the end by Mikal Bridges in Portland last night in the midst of their West Coast trip. But we think at the end of the day, it's going to be Cleveland and Boston. But for Oklahoma City, just a stupendous job going into Boston. And it was a very good game, tooth and nail. It was 98 all with about 6 minutes to go. And then the Thunder just took over from there, a 15-4 run, which propelled them with a big victory last night, a 118-112 win. And when we take a look at the Thunder, they are as complete of a team in the NBA that you could possibly even think of, let alone imagine. Because yes, we could talk about Cleveland and we could talk about everything that they've done, and we have gotten into them this year and even over the past few podcasts, considering that they do have the best record in the sport at 55-10. But the Thunder are 54-12. So they do not take a backseat to the Cavs, and they did split with them in the regular season this year. But for Oklahoma City, just to be able to know that you have a guy who is going to be a first-team All-NBA player in SGA on top of one of their other key pieces that were missing there yesterday, Jalen Williams. So you got to give him his due as a key contributor to this team. But it's all the other players, ones that you can't really pick out of a lineup. Maybe Chet Holmgren because of his size and his length and his, of course, playmaking ability too. The guy is not only a threat from the perimeter, but of course he can play low to the basket. Not that the NBA has that type of style. It's not the 80s and 90s where it's going to be played from the inside out and outside in. But with Lou Dort and Cason Wallace and Isaiah Joe, I mean, the team has a ton of weapons, although I'd be dubious at a big spot where you're going to need that secondary guy who's going to take that big shot. And I understand Lou Dort can make threes, and a lot of these guys can make threes in the league. But this team is rock solid. Throw in Isaiah Hartenstein to give you a little aggressiveness, to give you some defense, to give you rebounding. Knick fans here in these parts certainly know about the former Nick Hartenstein, but this team is one that looks like they're going to be able to take off. And what I mean by that is that with the West, although it's a little bit more loaded than the East, but I really truly think that last year, and granted we're only in the middle of March, still a month to go, but I really feel that this Oklahoma City Thunder team is going to have a big playoff run. And I understand you have a lot of vets there out West that are going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at this young and still on the rise and still growing up, if you heard SGA in the postgame last night. But there's something about this team that how could you not like? They're playing cohesive. They're playing together. It's similar to what the Cavaliers have done all year, although the Cavaliers have a bit more of a veteran presence with the cast of characters that you know well, with the Donovan Mitchells, the Evan Mobleys, Darius Garlands, etc. But what I saw last night with Oklahoma City, I was very impressed. I've watched them periodically throughout the course of the year. I'm not sitting here to say that I've watched Thunder games left and right, but of course last night I got to get the real feel, the complete package of this team, and that's what they are. And we could talk about the Celtics, and I'll get to them in a second, but what I took away from that game last night is that the team is complete, that this team is going to be ready for whatever's going to be thrown at them, whether it's going to be a jump shooting team like the Celtics are, whether it's going to be a team like Denver, or as we all know, is going to be precipitated by their own MVP candidate. And despite the fact that they won on Monday, when they had that weird scheduling quirk where you had Denver play Oklahoma City Sunday afternoon, and we talked about them on Monday. And then, of course, they had a game Monday night where the Nuggets did prevail and beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. But you're going to have a lot of people, once the playoffs begin, the bullseye are going to be on Cleveland and they're going to be on Oklahoma City. And how I look at it is, before I unpack both of those teams, because are they on a collision course for an NBA final? I'll get to that in a minute. But from what I saw there last night, between SGA and his brilliance, and we understand that, but the other parts of this team that make contributions and their defense was just stifling and swarming, and they just come at you in waves. And it's unlike, I'm not going to say anything we've ever seen, but in a day and age where the NBA, it's going to be, let's outscore them, let's shoot threes all day and night, and yeah, we'll play defense when we absolutely have to. And when you have that type of mentality, that's when you get in trouble, because when you have to play defense, that's when things falter. That's when your schemes and things of that nature that the coaches will come up with, for whatever reason, you're always going to have that one guy open, or you're always going to have a situation where in transition, you're always going to have numbers on the other side where you're not going to get back in time, or even deeper than that, where in crunch time, when your philosophy is going to be more offensive minded, and then defensively, when you know you absolutely have to get a stop, that's when you don't get one. So I like what I see with Oklahoma City. As far as the Celtics, real quick, because we could talk about just from the game, not overall big picture. Of course, we have plenty of time to unpack that as we move it along here, getting closer to the end of the season. But you can talk about all the threes that they shot, 62. That's the Celtics. And I understand it's preposterous to think that a team can actually shoot 62 three-pointers in a game. But this is how the Celtics are going to live and die. If you haven't watched the Celtics over the last few years, even when Ime Udoka was the coach for that 1 year, this is their game plan. They're going to try to just bludgeon you with threes. And even when you look at the disparity of the free throw shooting, and I saw some people on Twitter, wait a minute, how is it in the fourth quarter the Thunder shoot 22 free throws to the Celtics? I believe they had 6. And for the game, I think they shot 9 or 10. Well, when you're shooting a million threes and you're not getting to the basket and you're not attacking the basket, how do you expect to get to the free throw line? So for those who are out there thinking like, wait a minute, the referees certainly were in the back pocket of the Thunder, that is not the case. When you're shooting from behind the arc, left and right, how do you expect to get to the free throw line? So to me, that is just an overrated stat by anybody who's going to try to argue that the game was in the hands of the refs when it comes to the advantage for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I'm definitely not buying that. But the amount of threes that they shoot, the Celtics, which is typical, and they're the type of team that if they're going in, of course they're going to win. And that could be any team for that matter. And we've seen that in the past where teams try to chuck up a bunch of threes, and if you're going to hit anywhere between 15 to 20 a game, chances are you're going to win the game. And obviously the Celtics didn't. And whether it's that, whether it's a situation where you had Jaylen Brown, who was just fumbling, bumbling, and stumbling, fouled out, had 10 points in the game, and the OKC defense did very well against him. Derek White also fouled out as well, and there was a lot of confusion there with the Celtics as they just tried to break that Oklahoma City defense, and they were unable to do so. I understand it was tied there midway through the fourth quarter, and they had to come from behind a lot in this game. They were down by 9 in the first half and came back. They were down even by as many as, trying to think of what the score, 88-79. When they came back, they tied the game then, and then they made it 98-98 before Oklahoma City took off there. But when you're playing uphill all day, and all night in this case, it is going to be tough sledding. And especially when you're trying to get back in these games shooting threes, and you're not going away from your offensive game plan by any stretch, but you're going to run out of gas. And that's what happened there with the Celtics last night as they lose to Oklahoma City. But now with the big picture again, with the Thunder and even with the Cavaliers. Because think about this. The Cavalier team, which started out 15-0, and I've talked about this a million times here on the podcast, but now they've bookended that with a 15-game winning streak that they're currently on. And it's ironic because the last loss that they've had before the start of this 15-gamer was to the Celtics on February 4th, well before the All-Star break. And of course, the All-Star break, you take out that 1 week, but this team hasn't lost in almost a month and a half. And now this is where it gets interesting. Because with this Cavalier team, someone even asked me yesterday in the live stream, which I have on Wednesdays, YouTube, 12 noon Eastern time. So please join. It's an interactive approach where I'll get questions and a lot of back and forth with the people in the chat room. But I was asked whether or not the Cavaliers are going to win 70 games. Now, mind you, 55-10, do the math. They have 17 games left to go, so they'd have to go 15-2. I don't think they're going to do that, considering that they have been riding high and they've been just on an unbelievable clip here. And for them to get to 70, they're pretty much going to have to run the table, which I don't think is going to happen. But they're going to end up winning anywhere between 66 to 68 games, which is remarkable when you think about it. And if they're going to win that many games, and even for Oklahoma City, right now, what are they? Like I mentioned, 54-12. They're probably going to win 66 as well. Those two teams are going to have to get to a final. And that's why I ask, are they on a collision course? Because despite the fact that the Celtics are going to be in the way, or so we would think, come late May, and with the West, who knows if the Lakers are going to be there in a conference final. And I understand that the Thunder had to get to a conference final because last year they were a 1 seed and they lost in the conference semis. But let's just say, for right now, getting to a conference final, is that going to be against the Lakers? Is that going to be against Denver? Is that going to be maybe Golden State? That we'll have to wait and see. I don't know about Houston and Memphis just yet, although Memphis right now, they put themselves in good position. But the Lakers have a few games in hand against the other teams that are in that cluster between them, Denver, Memphis, and Houston. So for Oklahoma City, although it's a bit more of a gauntlet there in the West as opposed to Cleveland in the East, but Cleveland's going to have to face the reigning defending champs. And they lost them in 5 games last year, if you remember, in a conference semi. And you would think that's going to have a series of length where it's going to go minimum 6 and possibly 7. But are these two teams on a collision course considering the regular seasons that they're having? Right now, I'm going to say one of those two teams are not going to make it. Now, in the beginning of the year, I did pick Boston and OKC. So obviously, I'm going to stick with that. But Cleveland, not to say I need to see more, but I need to see this team in crunch time. I need to see this team down 2-1 in Boston for Game 4. I need to see them even down in the fourth quarter with the series tied at 2 in a conference final against the Celtics. Similar to Oklahoma City. Now, this is a team that obviously, despite the fact that they've had great regular seasons, but can you fully 100% trust them to not only get to a conference final, but to an NBA final? I would think that a lot of people that watch this sport and follow the league, although their gut may say, no, I think they're going to have a big year, but they can't say that with conviction because we have not seen them go through the rigors of an NBA playoff run to get to a point where we could put 100% stock and belief that they could get there. But how I look at it is that with the Cavaliers, well, I'll start with Oklahoma City and then get to Cleveland. With Oklahoma City, it's going to be a bit of a rougher ride, I would think, because whomever's 4 or 5, and I would think that they want to face Memphis or Houston, despite the fact that They're both younger teams, and they're both teams that could probably give them a run for their money. But I'm sure they want to avoid the veteran-laden teams, whether it is Golden State or the Lakers or the Nuggets. And as it is, they may avoid the Lakers and Nuggets until a conference final as it is to begin with. But for Oklahoma City, I feel like I have a lot more trust in them because of what happened last year and how they're backing it up with another big season. Where Cleveland, they're having their big season now. And I got news for you. For the fans in Cleveland and for the fans in Oklahoma City, there's going to be pressure on you. And I think I may have mentioned this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. There's going to be a bullseye on both of your teams heading into the postseason. Because you cannot have 66, 67, or 68 win seasons, and then if you get to a conference final and lose in 6 or 7, you can't say, oh, we had a good season. No, you got to back that sucker up. You just can't think that because we haven't had this resounding success in the regular season that whatever happens in the postseason is going to be gravy. And even if you do get to an NBA final, if it does happen to be Thunder and Cavaliers, of course, at that point, you just take your chances. But you have to get there with these type of regular seasons that you're having. I think OKC could get there, and I think Cleveland could get there too. But I think it's going to be much tougher for Cleveland considering that the Celtics are going to be waiting, and who knows what their health is going to be, whether or not Kristaps Porzingis is going to be a part of that series. We would think. Obviously, he's been sitting out with this illness that he's had here for the last 7 games. But all I can say is this. It's going to be fascinating to see how these two teams are going to perform. Not necessarily in the first round. 1-8 matchup. They're going to probably be a breeze. You would think a sweep of 5 games at most. Conference semis, all right, a little bit interesting depending on who they're going to play. Then we get to a conference final. That's where the money's on the line, and that's where we're going to see whether or not they're going to separate themselves, men from the boys, regular season for the first 2 rounds. And then if they get to a final, then fantastic. But obviously we have plenty of time to dissect. But I thought to bring that up right now because Thunder and Cavs right now are the story in the NBA because of their records, because of what they've done here in the regular season, and how far they're going to go obviously remains to be seen. But I think one of the 2 teams are going to get there. Of course, I picked OKC, like I mentioned. Cleveland, not to say I got to see more of, but I want to see them battle-tested, just like I want to see the Thunder battle-tested. So we'll wait to see what's going to happen there. Now, as far as what else is happening in the sport, I know over the course of the last couple of days, you had that crazy game in Indiana where Tyrese Halliburton hit that 3 and got fouled. Now, he traveled on the play, and I get it that they're not going to call that a walk in 2025, where he took that extra step to get that leap over Giannis. And then Giannis, to me, that was a ticky-tack foul. How could you call a foul on that play? And I understand, maybe regular season you call it, where in the postseason you don't. But we've seen that last year where Jaylen Brown hit that corner 3 in game 2. Now, there was contact there with Pascal Siakam, but still, it's one of those like, should he have called it? Should he have not? But anyway, the Pacers win that game, and that was a big game for Indiana because, as you know, there is a bit of a fight that's going on between the 4, 5, and 6 seeds there in the Eastern Conference. And with Indiana winning, although they are still tied, they are tied with the Bucks right now, but the Bucks have the tiebreaker. But if they were to get that 4-5 spot where they have the 4, they would be able to host the Bucks if the season ended today. But right now the Bucks are in the 4th position in the Eastern Conference. So that's going to be a fight, you would think, to the end. And then you want to throw in the Pistons, who are currently at 37 and 29. Now, both the Bucks and Pacers have 2 games in hand on the Pistons, so that bodes well for them as you get down toward the stretch of the season. But that's one race we're going to look at, as well as the race that's happening out west, as we know. Now, the 7 through 10 in the East, forget about it. That is a joke. And in fact, the Bulls, I would think, are going to be in good stead. They have a 5-game lead on the Raptors. Yes, the Raptors have actually leapfrogged over the Sixers and Nets here. So we would think that the East is going to be set. It's just a matter of seeding. When you break it all down, and the Heat have just been plummeting here, and right now they're actually closer to the 10th seed than they are to the 8th seed. No, as a matter of fact, they're tied. I'm looking at it here because I see Orlando's record with the 30 wins and Miami, so that's my apologies there. So the East, right now we would think as top-heavy as that's going to be, and then in the West, we talked about Memphis, Denver, they're 42-24 with Memphis right now in the 2 seed. Then you have the Lakers at 40-23. They play Milwaukee tonight in a TNT game, and then the Rockets at 41-25. And they've actually played better, winning 4 in a row, and had that scuffle there yesterday between Mason Plumlee and Steven Adams. If you saw that, not that that was anything to write home about, but you had a bit of a wrestling match between those two as they were both ejected as the Rockets won. But here's the thing. With Houston had played 66 games as well as Memphis and Denver, and the Lakers have only played 43. They have 3 games in hand on the 3 teams that are battling it out there for that 2 seed, which they're all separated by literally 1 game, despite the fact that the Lakers still have some ground to make up. So you have that, and then the Warriors have played just fantastic here. 5 in a row, 9 of the last 10, 37-28. They've actually now overtaken the T-Wolves, where the T-Wolves, they won last night in Denver, and they won now 6 in a row. So both the Warriors and Timberwolves have played well here, and that's going to be interesting because whomever makes the 6th seed will automatically be in the tournament, where if one of those 2 teams fall to 7, and right now that's where the T-Wolves are, they'll have to be in a play-in scenario. Now, the good thing for them is that they'll host in that first game, and if they win that game, they'll be the 7th seed. And if they lose, then they'll be the fallback to play the 9-10 winner. But that's the last thing you want to worry about if you're a team that is in the 7th seed, because you want to try to get the 6th, despite the fact that the Warriors have played well. And obviously that's going to be a race that we're going to see here to the finish. Then you have the Clippers, followed by Sacramento and Dallas. Now, here's the thing. Dallas, as we all know, they've been tattered, torn, bruised, battered, however you want to call it, but the Suns have not been able to gain any ground. Now, they got close when they beat them on Sunday, Phoenix, but now they have lost 2 in a row since then. They are 2 in the loss. Granted that they are currently, 2.5 back. And like I mentioned, the Suns, it's right in front of them, knowing that the Mavericks are saying, here, we're hurt. We're not going to be able to maybe even make up any ground on Sacramento. We're probably going to be entrenched in the 10th seed, even though they are a game and a half behind the Kings right now, but they're 3 in the loss. So you would think that that's going to be, I won't say go as far as say insurmountable, but chances are it's going to be that way, considering that the Mavericks are literally a mass unit at this point. So for the Suns, it's right in front of them, but they're not doing anything with it. They're saying, no, we don't want to get the 10th seed. We're just going to continue to just sputter and not get any type of momentum or gain any ground here. So the Suns, I tell you, just a disaster, as I talked about here time after time here on the podcast. But besides that, with the NBA, that's what you have. Now, as far as the schedule goes, before I get to a couple of sad news points here, the schedule over the next few days, we talked about Lakers and Bucks tonight, where the nightcap is Sacramento Golden State. So let's see if Sacramento could separate themselves a little bit further from the Mavericks. Besides that, you don't really have anything that's of note. Tomorrow, Boston and Miami and the Lakers in Denver are on NBA TV. Then you have Clippers in Atlanta, Dallas at Houston, Cleveland at Memphis, good game there. Orlando at Minnesota, Sacramento at Phoenix. So tomorrow night you have a good slate of games. Saturday, your ABC Saturday showcase is Knicks at Golden State. Miami at Memphis, only because Miami's in the thick of things. Nothing else really to Oklahoma City, Detroit, that's a very good game there Saturday night. Then on Sunday, you have Orlando, Cleveland, Phoenix at LA to play the Lakers. That is your ABC double dip. 1 o'clock in Cleveland, 3:30 at LA. ESPN that night, Oklahoma City at Milwaukee. So very interesting games here for the Thunder in Boston last night, Detroit Saturday, and at Milwaukee Sunday. And that is all you have there with the NBA schedule over the next few days. Now, some sad news where you had Junior Bridgeman. Now, here's a guy that talk about his post-NBA career being probably good, if not better, than his playing days. And that's not a knock, because Junior Bridgeman was a very good player. With the Lakers, was part of that trade there with Kareem in 75, and then was on those Buck teams in the late 70s into the early 80s, played on those teams with Sidney Moncrief, Marcus Johnson, guys like that, Paul Pressey, who had very good Buck teams, but they were unable to match wits or even match talents with the Celtics and Sixers there in the early 80s. And a guy who was a very good player, scored on average maybe anywhere between 15, 17 points a game, good defensive player, good NBA career. And his post-NBA career had a bunch of businesses, restaurants, franchises, to the point where he became a billionaire. And then sadly, a few nights ago, while at an event, I believe he was going to speak, had some pain in his chest and suffered a heart attack and died at the age of 71. Just a terrible story when you think about it. A guy who literally came from nothing, was, even as a player, just trying to make ends meet there in the early parts of his career. And despite the fact that he had a very good NBA career, and for his time, of course, made money, but certainly had to go out there and work, and that he did, to the point where he became a very successful businessman, and that is an understatement. Kind of like what we've seen here with Magic Johnson post-NBA career, whether it's with real estate or even with franchises in his own right and things of that nature, where we've seen a lot of these players do in their post-NBA days. But for Junior Bridgeman, solid NBA career, very good player, and for him to die in that fashion, oh, just a terrible story. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Buck family, the NBA, the Bridgeman family, of course, friends, etc. Terrible story there. And then Oliver Miller, who was a first-round pick of the Suns back in '92, played at Arkansas with Nolan Richardson and was a guy that had ability, but unfortunately was a guy that you could say ate himself out of his NBA career. Fluctuated with his weight, at one point ballooned over 300 pounds, was a power forward, and was a guy that, like I said, he had ability, played on I believe he was on that 93 Suns team that went to an NBA. As a matter of fact, he was drafted by the Suns that year. That was the first year Charles Barkley in the Sun, Valley of the Sun, that played against the Bulls on that first three-peat team for the Chicago Bulls. And for Miller, who bounced around in the NBA, didn't really have a big-time career, and unfortunately passed away there yesterday at the age of 54. Now, I don't know if there was let me see if I can pull that up real quick. I don't have the cause of his death, although it had been reported that he had cancer. Now, I don't know what type of cancer. I don't know what his situation was as far as him and his declining health. And if it was a situation where, was it stomach cancer, liver, lung, that I can't tell you. But all I know is that for him to have the type of career and for him to bounce around, and by the way, when I talked about Junior Bridgeman, he was selected by the Lakers, but was part of that trade with Kareem. But for the career of Miller, a guy that was promising coming out of Arkansas, didn't really, although had played in the league for quite some time, but didn't have the career that maybe a lot of people thought coming out of Arkansas, dies at the age of 54. Another terrible story. What more could you say? Thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to the Miller family. Now, sticking with the basketball theme, college, obviously, we're in the midst of conference championship week, and there really isn't much to discuss here. I know we could talk about a lot of the one-bid teams that have won, whether it be the UNC Wilmingtons of the world or the Montanas of the world or the Wolfords of the world who have qualified, and now we'll wait to see where they land here come Selection Sunday. But really what it's going to boil down to with a lot of these teams that are on the bubble, to me the biggest story is North Carolina. Now Carolina beat Notre Dame there yesterday and they're going to play Wake today. To me, they're going to have to get to minimum a semifinal, and obviously if they win the whole thing, they're going to make it into the tournament. But if they get to a final, I think they'll be in. Semifinal, it could still be borderline, although I could see the selection committee bringing them in to be one of the first four, which will be obviously starting on Tuesday, and it would likely be a 12th seed as of right this moment, and they could possibly play Xavier if they do happen to get into the play-in scenario. But that's pretty much the biggest story, because when we look at throughout all these other conferences, and the big conferences I'm talking about, whether it's ACC, SEC, Big East, etc., to me, anything short of North Carolina getting to a semifinal, they are going to be possibly in danger of not making it in. Now, they're a blue blood. Who knows what the committee's going to do? Are they going to actually put another team in? That we'll have to wait and see. But let's see how they do against Wake today. And then tomorrow will be the semifinal. As a matter of fact, the ACC, doesn't that go into the weekend? Don't they play their final game on Sunday? I should know this, but they flip-flop all the time with these conferences. And that's another thing, too. All these conference tournaments, they should end on Saturday, not Sunday, because that's when Sunday you could kind of take a breather from everything that's transpired here over the course of the week. You have your conference champions there on Saturday night. They'll cut down the nets. And then Sunday, you can exhale and then get ready for who's going to be a part of the tournament come Tuesday, Wednesday, and obviously, as I mentioned before, a week from today, that's when the madness will really begin. So we will certainly keep an eye on that with North Carolina over the weekend. And I'll talk about that as we get deeper into the weekend, of course, on the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ with my 1-minute shorts talking about what's happening in the world of sports. But besides that, to me, that is the only really fascinating storyline. And yes, we could talk about other teams that are on the bubble. We could talk about the likes of the one-bid teams that are trying to get in and so on and so forth. To me, let's wait for all the dust to settle. I bring up North Carolina. I know we could talk about Kentucky. We can even talk about Kansas for that matter, because Kansas, I think they will get in. I mean, unless they go belly up here. But I really feel that, again, the big story is North Carolina, whether or not they get in. And knowing that, 3 years ago, they went to a final and lost to Kansas. And then since then, they have not come anything close to them getting to a Final Four or them getting to a championship game. So to me, to get North Carolina, even if it is just for the play-in, and we would think that if they do win that game and just to get into the tournament, knowing that North Carolina is there, now are they going to have any length? Who knows? We've seen teams go on their runs, whether it was Syracuse with Jim Boeheim many years ago, and even Tom Izzo when they were part of the play-in scenario, and I believe they got to a regional final. So anything can happen here with the team like North Carolina if they do get new life and get resuscitated. But we'll see how this plays out over the course of the next few days. And obviously with the Tar Heels, we know that everybody's holding their bated breath, I'm sure, right up Tobacco Road with Duke. Right now, they're number one in the nation. And we would think, barring anything just epic as far as the collapse is concerned, we would think that Duke could be the number one overall seed heading into the tournament, as well as Houston, as well as Auburn, despite the fact that they are 2 losses, and even Florida, who could be dangerous here as a team that could possibly win the whole thing. And I'm not saying dangerous from the standpoint that everybody knows how Florida is. They're athletic, they could shoot. Obviously, they could be a team that's going to cut down the nets when it's all said and done in that first Monday, or now it'll be second Monday. No, it'll be the first Monday in April 7th. So for the conference tournaments, here we are, right in the throes of it, right in the mix. And with the storylines that are going to be about here, not necessarily with this week, but heading into the weekend, and as well as where the selection committee is going to put these teams, etc. You know I'm going to break it all down there come Monday. And that's what I'll do. Monday, of course, break down the brackets. And then a week from today, I'll give you my Final Four pick, because when I record it, it'll be prior to tip-off there, right after noon time on the East Coast, to where we'll get to watch all the games from midnight till about almost 1 in the morning on Thursday and Friday. So you know that I'll be all over that. So that's what you have there with the college basketball. Now should I lace up the skates first? You know what? I'm going to do that before I get to the NFL, because hockey, there's not really much going on here. Let me lace up the skates. This will be quick, fast, and a hurry, people. The only big story that you've had here over the last few days is Aaron Ekblad, the defenseman from the Florida Panthers, who is going to serve a 20-game suspension for PED use. And he did come out and admitted, and he didn't realize that what he took was going to be in a situation where it was going to put him and his team in, I'm not going to say jeopardy, but compromised. But is this going to be a big thing when we get to the postseason? Now, granted, he's going to miss the final 18 games, and he'll miss the first couple of games of the first round of the playoffs. So you're going to get Ekblad back probably game 3, and based on what I saw, he's going to miss 18, so he's going to miss the first 2 there. So he'll be back for game 3 on the road against the 8th-seeded team, which right now I believe would be the Ottawa Senators. Or maybe it's the Columbus Blue Jackets. We'll pull that up in a second. But for the Panthers, I'm sure it's a thing where they're going to miss him here down the stretch of the season. They are currently in first place in the Atlantic. Now, they'll actually be a 2 seed because the Capitals will be the 1 seed. I think of them as a 1 seed only because they are in first place in the Atlantic Division, only by 2 points over the Maple Leafs as currently constituted, but with the Capitals off and away there at 94 points. And you know what's interesting? I got a parallel here with Winnipeg, Washington to Oklahoma City and Cleveland in the NBA. Because these are 2 teams that a lot of people didn't expect to be where they are in their respective conferences. The Capitals currently have what? An 11-point lead over the Panthers, and the Jets have the same 11-point lead over the Vegas Golden Knights. Similar to the separation between Cleveland, Boston, and then OKC over Memphis, Denver, etc. These 2 teams, you would think they have to get to a cup final. This isn't a situation where it's conference finals or bust, or hey, if they get to a conference final and lose in 7, okay, it's been a good season. No. Did anybody expect the Capitals to be going at it with the Winnipeg Jets for the best record overall in the President's Trophy? I think not. A lot of people thought Florida. A lot of people thought Vegas. A lot of people maybe even went as far as saying Edmonton, Dallas, Colorado, the Rangers, a lot of people thought. So for the Capitals and the Jets to be here at this point, it is shocking. And maybe that should have been one of my headlines heading into this podcast or heading into this NHL segment. But that's one we're going to pay attention to, similar to OKC and Cleveland, as we talked about. But to me, if you're in Washington or in Winnipeg, you got to get to a cup final. That's all there is to it. But as far as anything else that's going on, I know Ekblad, that's going to be a loss here down the stretch, but you would think they're going to be entrenched in the 2 seed, so we think. But if they do get to a scenario where they have to play in a matchup against, let's say, the Lightning or even the Maple Leafs, because the Lightning could overtake them for the division since they're only 5 points behind Florida as of right this very moment. But we would think that the Panthers, let's say, if they do get the 2 seed, they'll play up against the 7 seed. And that 7 seed as of right this very moment in the wild card would be Ottawa. Now, I said Columbus. Columbus would be the 8th seed, so they would play the Capitals there if the season ended today. But NHL, there isn't anything else to really unpack, anything else to really get into. I'll talk about the schedule in a minute, but it is status quo. We know about the logjam there in the East between the Senators at 73 points, and they've won 4 in a row, and they've separated themselves just a little bit with some breathing room. But you have Columbus at 70, Montreal 69, Rangers, Red Wings, and Bruins at 68. So I won't even talk about the Islanders right now. So those are the teams that are separated literally by 2 points, and that's 5 teams for 1 spot there in the Eastern Conference. And then out west, with the wild card, Minnesota, who has a sizable lead, 7 points over Calgary. But with Vancouver beating Calgary yesterday in a shootout, and both teams got points, so Calgary does have the tiebreaker there, and also a game in hand. But they're both tied at 71 points, St. Louis at 69, and Utah with 69. So you have 4 teams for the 1 spot in the West and 5 teams for the 1 spot in the East. So that's going to make for interesting theater down the stretch of the season. And the races in the divisions, I'm not going to get into. I understand that. I mean, Ottawa's 5 points behind the Lightning, and the Blue Jackets are, 6 points behind the Devils. So they're fine as far as the race there, unless they just all of a sudden fold like a cheap suit. Then you have Colorado, who is 3 points ahead of the Wild, and the Kings 6 points ahead of Calgary. So you would think those teams that are the top 3 in each of those divisions, they're going to be safe, barring anything drastic that's going to happen here. It's just the wild cards that are going to be fascinating. And then you have the one race, if you ask me, the one race in the Atlantic where Toronto's 2 points behind and Tampa's 5 points behind. Other than that, you don't have a race in any of the others. So it's going to be wild card and the Atlantic as far as anything to watch out for here down the stretch of this NHL season. And as far as the schedule goes for the next few days, big one tonight, Florida at Toronto. So if Toronto wins, they'll be tied at the top of the Atlantic. So that's one to keep an eye on. Boston at Ottawa, very good game there, especially when you're talking about playoff seeding, and with that wild card, as important as that is, and even though Ottawa is separating themselves a little bit, but Boston has to get closer. So a big game there. Tampa's at Philly. Vegas at Columbus. Edmonton at New Jersey. Now, Edmonton is here over the course of the weekend. New Jersey tonight, on the island tomorrow against the Islanders, and then Sunday against the Rangers at the Garden. So for those who want to see Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, here's your chance to do so over the next 3 nights. Rangers in Minnesota. Washington at LA. And Ovechkin hasn't scored here in the early part of the week, so he's still 9 behind with I think about 16 games to go. So we'll talk more about that on Monday. Tomorrow, Edmonton at the Islanders, as I mentioned. Detroit at Carolina. Dallas at Winnipeg. That's a big game there. Although Dallas is, I believe they're 6 points behind, or maybe even 8 points. I got to take a look at that again. But Winnipeg has a sizable lead on Dallas at the moment. Colorado at Calgary. Then Saturday, Jersey at Pittsburgh is your ABC afternoon game. Snooze fest, if you ask me. Tampa at Boston. Ottawa at Toronto. Florida at Montreal. Rangers at Columbus, big game there. Then you have, on Sunday, TNT double dip is Vegas at Detroit. Dallas at Colorado. That's a good one there. So Dallas looking ahead to Winnipeg and then Colorado, 2 teams that obviously are either they're looking up at or right below at in the division. Then you have Edmonton at the Rangers, Florida at the Islanders. That's pretty much what you have there with the NHL as we close out the weekend with the schedule. Now let me get to the NFL, and all I'll say is this. Yes, you've had a lot of player movement. Yes, plenty of transactions to chew on. As far as the big storyline, has there been anything that's been outlandish or eyebrow-raising or anything that... And I will say this, I'm not doing this to piss on the NFL as I've done here over the last God knows how long. But has there been a seismic shift here with the transactions that have taken place pretty much on Sunday? Nothing that really jumps out or nothing that really is going to move the needle. And yes, we could talk about what has taken place, and we will do so when we look at some of the other storylines that, to me, when I look at these 4 days, what it encapsulates, and there are 3 of them. One I didn't mention in my live stream yesterday, so that's my apologies, but this is why I have the podcast for you guys and gals to listen to. So yes, you haven't had anything that's been earth-shattering. You haven't had anything that's been, whoa, that team did this. Nothing along those lines. But here are the 3 storylines that I look at here that we could chew on and really dive into as far as free agency, trades, etc. Number 1 are the Niners. The Niners, they have had a purge here over the last few days, and I understand they've brought some players on, whether it's guys like DeMarcus Robinson or even Mac Jones or the safety for the Giants last year, Jason Pinnock. All right, to me, those are fringe pieces. Robinson, who's bounced around, as you know, and for Mac Jones, same for him. So this isn't anything that's going to really shake up the Niner roster by any stretch. But considering Javon Hargrave, considering Dre Greenlaw, considering Tanaloa Hufanga, considering Leonard Floyd, considering Charvarius Ward, considering Kyle Juszczyk, I mean, that's been an overhaul. And this Niner team, who over the last 5 years, last year notwithstanding, they have made it to 3 conference championships and 2 Super Bowls. And we know Kyle Shanahan, offensive genius that he is, haven't been able to seal the deal, especially in the big game. And they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy a pretty penny. Now, I understand he's probably not going to get $50 million, but I'm sure he's probably going to get 4 years, maybe 180. He's going to get somewhere in the $40 to $45 million a year vicinity. I don't think he's going to get paid to the likes of Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa, now Josh Allen. And of course, he was already getting paid prior to him getting his new contract where he's getting $250 million guaranteed. But now Purdy, you're going to have to pay. So for a Niner team, remember Deebo Samuel, which is going to lead to my next storyline. The Niners, they're going to have to not only put this thing together, but they're going to have to reload. It's not even a matter of retooling. And this team that has had success here, now you have to wonder whether or not they're going to be able to pick up the pieces and put it together to a point where they can be competitive. Now, they're in a division that is wide open. Because despite the fact that the Rams won, and I believe, what were they, 10-7 when the season ended? Let me look that up real quick, because I think they lost that last game of the year, did they not? When they had, who they lose to, Seattle in that final game, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're the Rams, who were, let's face it, a team that was this close from going to a conference championship game, and you have to understand that with their, and they did lose to the Seahawks in that final game, and they were 10-7, so all right, I'll give them that. But this is a division that is wide open. The Rams, they've made some moves here, as you know, bringing in Devontae Adams and replacing him with Cooper Kupp. Now, Kupp is released. Who knows where he's going to end up here. But the Niners, it's not as if they have to, yes, they're going to have to bring in some pieces, but it's not as if they're in a division where they've fallen behind that much. They're not playing in the AFC North. They're not playing even in the NFC North, for that matter. So I think they could still put it together, but it's going to be a thing where how much they're going to be able to put it together. And if they're going to be able to get themselves back to anything close to what they once were over the last 5 years. That's storyline number one. Number two are the Commanders. Because bringing in Deebo Samuel by trade, as we know, and then now they let go of Jonathan Allen, a key part of that defensive line, and he ends up in Minnesota. But for them to not only bring in a key offensive piece there, but then they also bring in Laramie Tunsil. And is he Anthony Munoz or Jonathan Ogden? No, but he's a guy that is going to protect a one Jaden Daniels to go along with the pieces that they have there on offense. And I think what they've done here has been very shrewd. Now, they haven't signed anybody of note. They haven't gone as far as bringing in that big piece, whether that's a big-time free agent. But when you bring in two pieces like that to help fortify your offense with your young rookie quarterback, that's going to go a long way. So to me, I thought they did well here in this transition period. Now let's see what they're going to do here as the free agency and the offseason continues, and especially when we get closer to the draft, to see where they're going to go. Now, of course, they're going to have a low mid-round pick, but obviously there's some good vibes and good juju there in the nation's capital, and what they've done here with those two moves, to me, have been substantial. And then lastly are the quarterbacks in Pittsburgh and with the Giants for two totally separate reasons. The Steelers, you know I'm going to start there, being the Steeler nutcase that I am. They bring in DK Metcalf. They sign him to the big-time deal. Who's throwing on the ball? Is it going to be a guy that we've seen before, whether his name is Russell Wilson, who I might add is going to visit the Giants, and I believe he's visiting the Browns as well. And the Browns, they actually got Kenny Pickett for a pick and Dorian Thompson Robinson. So Kenny Pickett on the move yet again. But when you bring in a caliber of DK Metcalf, who is a top 10 wide receiver, and for him to come here and he got his money, but who's throwing him the ball? Is Russell Wilson coming back? Now it seems the steam that looked like was picking up for Aaron Rodgers has now cooled off a little bit about him going to Pittsburgh, but who knows, stranger things have happened. But are they going to bring back Russell Wilson to reunite him with his one-time wide receiver there in Seattle? Or are they going to go elsewhere? Nah, they're going to go Kirk Cousins? Oh, please, don't do that. I'd rather you keep Wilson. If you listen to the podcast, I wanted Justin Fields, but as we all know, he's a member of the Jets at this current moment. So if you're the Steelers, is there going to be a remarriage for their starting quarterback at the end of last year to translate that into this year? Or are they going to go elsewhere? What are they going to do? And then with the Giants, it's even bigger because they do have the third pick in the draft. Do they like Shedeur Sanders? Is Cam Ward going to drop down? Do they love Cam Ward that much that maybe they'll trade him up to number 1 with Tennessee, which means they're going to have to give up another big-time draft pick this year, or maybe even next year? That means another number 1. Because we would think that with the Browns and that situation with Deshaun Watson with his contract, that they're not going to pick a quarterback there at number 2. So for Joe Schoen, the GM, and even for the coach Brian Daboll, this could be their last stand. And in fact, they're actually right on the plank. And they haven't started walking yet, but they're on it. And for Schoen, he's going to have to get this right. So they're going to need to have a quarterback, whether that means they draft one, if they're in love with Shedeur Sanders, or if they're going to wait to maybe the second round early on to draft Jackson Dart, the kid from Ole Miss. Or do they go the route of bringing in Aaron Rodgers, which has been rumored, or now they're going to have Russell Wilson coming to visit? Is there a possibility that Kirk Cousins could be in the mix here? Who knows? But the GM cannot get this wrong. His job is on the line. Simple and plain. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, to me, that's what we're going to look at here. Now, I understand during this free agency period, it's not as if they're going to be rushed to try to secure that quarterback, whether it's the aging Wilson and Rodgers, etc. But they're going to have to do something. And considering that the Steelers haven't done anything as of yet with their new wide receiver in tow, and with Schoen and Daboll, what are they going to do? Because they know that they're going to have a successful season in order for them to keep their jobs. Minimum, you would think they have to win 7 games. I understand that that's not a lot, but they're coming off a season where they won 4. And the year before that, they were bad as well. So they're going to have to show some progress, whether that means they bring in Shedeur Sanders or a young quarterback, or they go with a veteran quarterback to save their face and maybe win 7 to 9 games and be on the fringe of a playoff spot in the NFC. Well, that will have to wait and see. So to me, those are the big storylines of the last few days. And obviously this final storyline is going to be one that's ongoing here into the spring. Now, we could go through all these deals, people, and can I say that New England made a big splash with all defensive moves, whether it's bringing in Harold Landry, Milton Williams from Philadelphia, Carlton Davis, Robert Spillane. I mean, we could talk about that, and yes, those are significant upgrades, but is that going to move the needle here for the NFL fan when it comes to free agency? I don't think so. Josh Sweat going to Arizona? I don't think so. DeAndre Hopkins signing with the Ravens. We've seen this movie before with Odell Beckham Jr. How did that end up 2 years ago? And that's not a knock on DeAndre Hopkins, but let's face it, his all-pro days are behind him. And even with Hopkins in the mix, to me, he's going to be an Odell Beckham Jr. 2.0, where Beckham came there and everybody thought, oh, wow, the weapon that they finally got for Lamar Jackson. He was more of a decoy than anything. How did that work out? So, and that, again, not a knock on Hopkins, etc. And that's not me trying to throw cold water on the Ravens or their fans, etc. But have you not seen that movie before? Now, Cooper Kupp, where he goes, is going to be fascinating. Let's see what happens there. Daniel Jones, now with the Colts, he's going to battle it out with Anthony Richardson. Is that something like, oh, wait, no, let's see what's going to happen. Quarterback controversy? Joey Bosa, we thought maybe he'd go up the coast to play with his brother Nick in San Francisco. Instead, Von Miller gets dropped, and obviously, who knows if he's going to have one last stand on an NFL roster, considering he's been around 12 years and he's in the twilight of his career. But Joey Bosa signs in Buffalo for 1 year. Now, could Joey Bosa go out and get double-digit sacks for a team that's going to absolutely positively need it because they need a pass rush in the worst way? Now, I'm sorry. I think the over-under totals for sacks, let's say even if you put it at 10.5, I'd probably still take the games that he misses, which could be maybe right now 5.5. So he misses 6 games. I can see the latter happening more than the former. Now, if he's healthy, he could be a game record. But that is a big, giant if. And I know the Cowboys have made some moves here with Kaiir Elam making trades. Javonte Williams they bring on. And they also bring on, I believe, Kenneth Murray. Again, move the needle? I don't think so. DeMarcus Lawrence goes to Seattle. I know for the Cowboy fan that may move the needle because obviously we know how big he was as far as him anchoring that defensive line in Dallas. Khalil Mack comes back 1 year, $18 million with the Chargers. I mean, really? Just Zach Wilson in Miami? Now, I understand. not all these moves are going to be groundbreaking, eyebrow-raising, earth-shattering, understood. But you don't really have anything that's super juicy or to sink your teeth into, like, wow. Like last year when Kirk Cousins signed with Atlanta. Understood Kirk Cousins is not Patrick Mahomes, but you thought Atlanta with their weapons, their running game, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. Now they got a quarterback, and a good one at that, and he's good. Kirk Cousins, when he's healthy, he's a good quarterback. How did that work out? But at the time, with the money that he got and everything, people thought, wow, Atlanta, they should probably win a division, maybe host a wild card game. Could they get to maybe a conference championship? As we know, that didn't happen. But that was an item last year that a lot of people thought, oh, wow, hey, all right. You didn't get that this year. And that's my point. All right, let me go to baseball, and then I'll wrap it up with some golf news. Baseball, this will be quick. Gerrit Cole done for the year. Tommy John surgery is going to be needed. Probably won't come back until the middle of next year. And I know the Yankee fans, the season's over. This and that. What are we going to do? Brian Cashman, you got to trade for somebody. This is, to me, as big of a story as it is a non-story when it comes to the 2025 Yankees. For this reason, and this reason only. And it's actually twofold, come to think of it. One, the American League is so bad that the Yankees, by accident, will be in the playoffs. And wait, JAYREELZ, how can you say it's so bad? What are you, nuts? What are you, smoking? No, I am not. Let's go through it. The Red Sox have made improvements, and I think that they probably will get into the postseason. Maybe they win a division, maybe not, but I think they'll get one of the 3 wild cards. Forget about Toronto. Baltimore, they could be another team that could get one of the 3, but what have they done here in this offseason? Unless you're going to get monster years, and I mean monster, as you saw there last year with Gunnar Henderson, who was part of the MVP race, Adley Rutschman, the Jordan Westbergs of the world, guys like that are going to, Cedric Mullins, they're going to have all monster years offensively because their rotation is in shambles. Grayson Rodriguez has to sit out because of that elbow. Kyle Bradish, the Dean Kramers of the world, are you going to trust them 100%? A 41-year-old Charlie Morton? Need I say more? The Rays, forget about them. They're going to be a transient team. They're going to play in Steinbrenner Field. They're going to have to play all their home games in the first 2.5 months of the year. And they're going to have to play 67 of their final 103 on the road. That's a mess. The Central, do you expect any of those teams? Maybe the Royals will be a team that can surprise, but do you expect them, when it's all said and done, Yankee fans, to beat you up in a division series or in an ALCS? Saw what happened last year. Rest my case. The Astros are not the Astros anymore. Yeah, they may win the division by default, but they are a far cry from their World Series team just literally 2.5 years ago. Do you believe in the Rangers, even though they won a World Series 2 years ago? But I don't know. On the fence with them. Seattle, they can pitch, but they can't hit. Forget about the Angels. The Athletics, they can hit, and they have some pieces, but I don't expect them to threaten anyone in the AL West. That leaves the Yankees. And they're going to have enough, and I'm sure Brian Cashman has a rabbit that'll pull out of his hat, and they'll win a division or at least get a wild card, and they'll probably get to a World Series, and that's that. So if the Yankee fan thinks that because Gerrit Cole's not there, and remember, he wasn't there for the first 2.5 months of the season last year, and how did that work out? So that's why there's no problem, or at least for me in my eyes, that the Yankees are in any sense of trouble this year. That's number one. And the flip side of that, even with Gerrit Cole at 35, and I guess he'll be 36 this year, and you can say, oh, he's an older pitcher, all the mileage on his arm, oh my God, how is he going to be coming off of Tommy John? What happened to Justin Verlander when he came off of Tommy John that he suffered in 2020? He only won a Cy Young Award in 2022 to a 1.75 ERA, and I believe he was 18-4. Now, do I expect Gerrit Cole to mirror those same numbers? Absolutely not. But to think that, oh, this is a death sentence, that this is the end of Gerrit Cole's career, he's not going to be the same pitcher, he's not going to come back better, stronger, etc. I don't think that's going to be the case. And Verlander did that in 2022 when he was what? 39 years of age? So I am not going to dismiss that this is the end for Gerrit Cole. Or for the Yankees for that matter. So that's all I got to say on that. And if you think otherwise, then I don't know. You may have to worry about something else. Because I think the Yankees are going to be fine. And on top of that, I think he'll be fine. Now, you had this story with Mo Vaughn that he used HGH later in his career for knee issues. Now, that means when he was a member of the Mets in 2002, in those final couple of years, Anaheim and the Mets. So, Mo Vaughn, who won an MVP in 95, I just bring this up because for anybody who's going to think that. And Mo Vaughn, good guy, obviously was a big-time slugger in his day. But you want to throw that story out for whatever it's worth. He's not going to the Hall of Fame, people, so you don't have to worry about that. But I just thought to throw that out there for whatever the reason. And then Dave Roberts got a 4-year, $32 million extension. Most of the sport annually, I think it's $32.5, where he's going to make a little bit more than Craig Counsell in Chicago. So you had that with baseball, which will begin on Tuesday in Japan, Cubs, Dodgers, but really 2 weeks from today, that's when the baseball season will begin, and I'm looking forward to that. And then finally, as I lace up the gloves and get to the tee box, the Players Championship, the TPC otherwise known as, is this weekend in Ponte Vedra in Florida, where you're not going to see Tiger Woods. And just when you thought maybe working out and getting himself ramped up for the Masters, which is actually 4 weeks from today. So the tradition, unlike any other, as the golf season will really be introduced at that time. But no Tiger Woods, as he had to have surgery on a ruptured Achilles, which will have him sit out for the entire year. And remember, when the 4 majors are played, April, May, June, and July, all in a row, where you'll have Masters, of course, PGA in May, the U.S. Open in June, and in July you'll have the British Open, or otherwise known as the Open Championship. You won't see Tiger. He's going to try to shoot for Augusta, you would think, next year, maybe a couple of tournaments prior to that to tune up before Augusta. But we know Tiger, 49 years of age, his body is breaking down, it's betraying him, and we just hope for speedy recovery. We know that Tiger, even if he's just makes the cut at this point, we would just be thankful that he's still out on the golf course, and knowing that he has to walk 72 holes over the course of 4 days with everything that he's had to endure over the years, the back issues, the knee issues, the leg that almost had to be amputated from that car accident out in LA back in 2021, and then now he has an Achilles issue. I mean, you just hope for a speedy recovery, and he'll get back on those links at some point, where maybe at the end of the year, not that he's going to be playing in any tournaments, but you may see him at an event, or he may just show up to be a part of a particular golf tournament. But for Tiger, one more time, we just hope that he gets back in a speedy fashion when it comes to his health, and you will not see him on any of the majors here, which again will tee off the first one 4 weeks from today down in Augusta, Georgia. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books as always. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is to have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review. It'll go a long way, people, to increase the visibility of this podcast with all the others that are out there, and especially for someone like myself who is an independent content creator, podcaster, etc. This is my only source of income. I do not have a 9-to-5 anymore. So the more you pump it out to those who either like sports, casual sports fan, love sports, the kook sports fan like yourself, or like myself, yourself, hey, you could be a kook that's watching and listening, and if you are, I appreciate you very much so. But please, spread the word, share with all those that are out there. I would sincerely appreciate it. And if you haven't done so, to any of my socials, that also includes Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, the YouTube channel, please subscribe there, at JAYREELZ, Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. Or if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion at any of the aforementioned social media accounts, or the email at gmail.com, the JAYREELZ Podcast, of course, I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA, as I like to say, talking sports since birth, trying to blaze a path and trail in this podcast universe as your source for all the sauce in the world of sports when it comes to talking sports, because as you know, whether it's 3 in the morning or 12 noon on a Wednesday doing a live stream on YouTube, I will have nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.